Hi, my name is John Weston. I'm from East by Northeast Restaurant in Montauk, New York, where I'm the chef. Today for the Culinary Club, I'm preparing monkfish on the bone with passion fruit vinaigrette, fingerling potatoes, and preserved lemon. As introduced, I'm John Weston from East by Northeast. I was here last year and had a great time, so Ethan asked me to come back. You guys asked me to come back. Today we're doing a monkfish dish that was very popular over the summer this year. I was told by one of my employers that it's the ugliest fish in the sea, and somehow or another I made it look beautiful. So generally when you get monkfish, it comes this way. You can ask for it. It will come cleaned when you order it as chef and workers. It's got a big head on it. If you're fortunate enough, you can ask for the whole fish cleaned, and you'll get what's called monkfish cheeks, which is a very nice delicacy, often served with things like oxtails and other yummy meats. Anyway, this is the way it comes. Spines on it and tail, and there's a very heavy silver skin, which holds the rest of the body to the fish. You can leave it, but it tends to make it a sort of ugly gray on the plate, and that's not something you really want to do. It also tends to be rather chewy. Also known as lobster of the sea or poor man's lobster, which is kind of funny considering lobster in and of itself used to be a trash fish. So let's just get started. I'm going to break the silver skin off. This is one of these jobs that if you have a commis, you can give it to them so they can get their skills together. If you're working in the industry, it's a good task to learn simply for trading off for something less evil. Because it's going to take me about 5 or 6 minutes just to pull the skin off of this. All right. Now, you can imagine if you have 30 or 40 of these guys to do for the day, you want to burn through this pretty quickly. What I like to do is, you saw it, take the fins off and then run down the spine on either side. If you have a really great pair of shears, you can actually snip part and parcel of the bone. Thank you. And that will also help open this up. You gotta remember, this is just the tail, and when you get down to the bare end here, it's pretty much pure tendon, and you'll see when this cooks, this will actually pull away from the bone, and that's one of the indications that the fish is done. Generally, I use the indication of albumin, which is a protein in the fish. It comes white to the surface. When the fish is opaque, it's done. It's a rather firm flesh fish. Texture is, as they say, poor man's lobster. I liken it more to a very mild bass. So to continue, you just want to get underneath the silver skin and peel it away as cleanly as possible. You have to remember that as a chef or a cook, when you're doing your ordering and you're trying to portion, you need to make sure that you order a little extra, because there's not a tremendous amount of waste, there's a fair amount of waste coming off of this. Not necessarily usable for things like stocks or bouillons. You can do that, but it tends to be very dirty, and by the time you skim away everything that you need to skim away to make a nice clear broth or stock, you've kind of just poured everything down the drain anyway. I've yet to been able to find it. If you can find something to do with it, then more power to you, and that's good product utilization. You always want to look for that when you're working in this industry, because things, especially nowadays, are going through the roof. One of the reasons I took this as whole fish on the bone as opposed to just loins is numerous reasons. You'll find that when you're ordering this fish from a vendor or say from a fisherman, they tend to send you the smallest ones possible because the larger ones go to large houses. If you're a small industry restaurant, Unless you have a really good rapport with your local vendor, then you're liable to get things that are not the size that you want. I seem to have a lot of difficulty with that, even though I've been doing this in Montauk for almost 20 years. Fortunately, I did finally land a guy and develop a relationship, and I've gotten these as big as this, which is oversized for what our portions are. It's just easier to work with, and the smaller your product, the less you have to work with, the more you're throwing away, and that's no fun. For our purposes today, I'm just going to go ahead and break this up into darns for a plate presentation later. But normally what would happen is you'd end up with this more, as you can see now, whiter fleshed fish. It's prettier than it was previously. All right, so let's just, if you want to bring that up. There you go. So I crushed some peppercorn here. I prefer, as I like to say, real pepper as opposed to ground. It's more aromatic than the other. And you end up using less at the end of the day, I believe. So well seasoned. Both sides. I also have training where I was taught to use fresh herbs to help season. It's a little trick that one of my old chefs taught me was to you just lay the herbs right on there and you get your pan hot enough and it sort of makes a picture, almost like a sketch into the product that you're working with. This is not just flour, it's called Wondra. It's a coarse flour. I'm sure there's another name for it. It's called Wondra because it doesn't clump, and it's generally used for gravies. Using it as a foil to help keep the fish from sticking. If you're sauteing at any time, you always want to have a dry product, otherwise you wind up with things stuck to the bottom of the pan, unless you're making some sort of sauce or gravy, which you want things stuck to the bottom of the pan, so you can get that nice browning. This is a blended olive oil, 75% neutral canola type oil and 25% virgin. I don't know if any of you guys heard that program on NPR about olive oil and the different qualities of olive oil and all the things that happen to unscrupulous vendors. That the olive oil market has gone a little crazy, and things you get in your grocery store aren't necessarily always what they seem. So with the Wondra, it's going to help keep it from sticking to the pan. A lot of times if you're in a rush, you'll need something to help that go if your pan isn't seasoned. This is an unseasoned pan. Normally what I'll do with something like this is heat the pan, bring it up to a very high heat with a non-scented oil, almost a fry oil. And what that will do is you open up the interstitial spaces in the pan, the spaces in between the aluminum. The oil gets in there, you let it cool, do it a couple of times, you have a quickly seasoned pan, helps keep it from sticking. Dishwashers love me because my pans aren't all stuck up. But for today, we'll see what happens. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and break this up so that it fits on the plate for later presentation. Also reduce the cooking time a little bit. All right. So while this is getting set, cutting board? No more? Not that I need one. The accoutrements to go with this are, we have some Russian fingerling potatoes. They're long, and these have been blanched in salted water. Actually, they've been fully cooked through. And these will just accompany sort of a New England fish and potato thing that the owners wanted. Also, with this is preserved lemon, which is actually kind of a Mediterranean thing, but you'll find it in sundry cuisines. Preserved lemon is just lemon that has been salted and left for 3 to 6 months, and it just sort of tenderizes it. And what I've done is I've taken the lemon and I've rinsed it. Actually, I think we have some around. Maybe if you had some small cups, you might pass some out and the kids can taste. So this is just about ready. Just to bring this to a shimmer. Just go ahead and bring this in. So the fish will be seasoned with preserved lemon. I don't have a fumet. I didn't do a fumet with this dish. What I ended up doing was using clam juice. Plain old, straightforward, simple clam juice. You can use any brand so long as the ingredients are clam juice and clam juice. You don't want anything weird going in there. I don't use a fumet where I am. I could. Only closest thing I have to a fumet is a dashi stock made with dried bonita flakes. And that's kelp and dried bonita and water, and that's what we use where I am. So I don't have that. So we'll just brown this up while that's going. I want to get this in the oven first, so I'll take a break for a minute. So normally, when we do this at the restaurant, this is a whole fish, and then as we start to brown, add some potatoes. You just want to give them color. Color is flavor. And this amalgam of stuff that you see here is the preserved lemon that I use for our tasting, and it's in a broth of scrapings from what you'll be getting. And clam juice. So it's just lightly colored. You can see how the tendon is playing with this tail piece. It's starting to make the fish bend. If you cut that, it will stay straight. The other reason we cut the ends off is you get this pretty fin action going on. I cut the other ones off is because they're very, very sharp, and if a customer gets that in their mouth, they're not going to be too happy. I also cut them off for my own self-preservation because I've been stuck with more monkfish spines than I care to remember. Just get a little more color. Potatoes can get a little nice browning. Remember that the starch in the potato, anytime you have a starch like that, that's going to want to stick also. So that's the other important reason to have your pan nicely seasoned. You just want to get a color. And I'm going to deglaze the pan a little bit with the clam juice. Also in here is some roasted garlic. You have to do all these things a little ahead, even for service, because the preserved lemon tends to be a bit tough and it's very, very sharp. As I started to say before, I rinse it a couple of times and then let it soak for about an hour to pull the extra salt off. You take the lemon and you have to break them up. You can do them yourself, because I'm cheap. You get a glass, or what they call a non-reactive container, and those will go for 3 to 6 months in just pure kosher salt and some lemon juice. It's gonna be fine.
Chef, do you have just the juice, or you have lemons in there too?
It's just a preserved lemon.
Oh, okay. No, I meant for tasting.
Oh, for tasting? They can just taste the whole thing at the end. Because I wanted them to taste the real preserved lemon by itself. That was what was left behind, because it's a real pucker.
Yeah.
It's a real pucker. Let's go in here. By the time we're done, we can present that. I know this is low, but we'll make that work. Just get this up. Yep, that can go off. So now for the finishing sauce, which is actually very easy. Passion fruit puree, some garlic, and passion in just juice. Passion fruit juice, oil, same oil that I was cooking with. If you go with too much fruitiness, sounds kind of strange, that why would you not want to go more fruity with the fruit? If you go with too much fruitiness, it throws it out of balance. I'm missing the rest of my ingredients. In any case, garlic and a shallot. Yeah, garlic and a shallot. I was missing something. All right, so this is just, this makes a lot because it's restaurant size. Passion fruit puree, generally bartenders use this for a lot of different drinks and things. We use it for dessert glosses. I use it for dressing, for salads. It's good for fish, chicken, and it's also good for bitter greens like frisee, arugula, anything with a lot of bite to it. This will cut that. So this is 3 cups of this, or 2 cups of this. It's a real high acid content. You can add Dijon to this to help it bind, but there's a fair enough acid in this. It's gonna work.
I'm on to a shallot.
That's fine. Just clean this out. Actually, let's get rid of that guy. This is actually the right size for this, because normally we get giant shallots for massive amounts of everything in season. Actually, a little bit more. With this recipe, generally put in the base ingredients, and normally you just adjust the seasoning with salt and pepper. With this one, you need to adjust with everything that goes into it, depending on the kind of passion fruit you get. That should pretty much be status quo with anything you're doing in the kitchen. All right, so have some garlic. Thyme I'm not going to put until the end. peppercorns, and salt. That's for that guy. But I can see the clock there now, so. All right, so I'm just gonna blend this up. Great. What? No, you're fine. What? Yeah, it makes a lot. And this is the scaled down version. All right, so here we go. Lovely. Can you pass me one of those plates? So the dressing's done. That's it. it's really 1, 2, 3. And it makes a fair volume as well. And it draws, it's easily pullable. Yeah, first one off, it's great. All right. So any questions? Looks like we're about to spot there. As I said earlier, I liken it to a very mild bass, almost like a sea bass, but texture-wise, they call it poor man's lobster because when you get a monkfish loin, you can slice it very easily and do sort of your almost like a lobster salad. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tear that way, so you're not really gonna fool anybody that eats lobster regularly. They're not, you know, they're gonna say this is not lobster, but. It's a juicy fish. It's very full, texture-wise in the mouth, but I liken it to bass as far as a mild bass, like a sea bass, not a striped bass. Striped bass is a whole nother kettle. All right, these are ready. Just about. Some of the smaller ones are. We'll give this a couple more minutes. 10 to 15 on a good day. Not too long. I mean, these were ice cold. Generally what we do for service is, depending on where the reservation count is, we start searing them just about, we open at 5. So if we have a push at 5 o'clock, we'll start searing them about a half an hour before, run them into a holding oven, and then out they go. And then during service, as soon as the order comes in, if they have an appetizer, our ticket time is about 10 minutes. Yes, sir. For this recipe, actually this recipe is actually based off of a whole fish recipe that I did. I did another program, and I just did they asked me to do something that I really like to do, and I really like porgies and snapper and that sort of thing. So this was something specifically for the restaurant. Personally, I love monkfish, but I like all kinds of fish, but I'm a big fan of snapper and those types of porgy, bass type fish. And it's a great one. And all you would do there is leave the fish whole, head on, make sure it's well scaled, make sure it's well gutted, and then you wanna cut some bias cuts towards the bone along the body of the fish, so that way you can stuff that with your preserved lemon, which will, it's like having somebody stand there with the lemon juice right on top of it. But that lemon juice, that preserved lemon, especially if you saute it a little bit first and then let it cool and then set it in there, it gets a creamy texture, which you'll see later when you taste. And so you'll be able to bite into the lemon and have this nice creamy burst of lemony essence going through your sinus and your palate. And that's the beauty of this dish, is that, it's not something that's that you expect. But yeah, pretty much anything else whole is good. If you want to do filet, you really have to make sure you part cook everything else. So salmon's a little bit strong for this, but all of those fishes that I named are very mild kind of in flavor. It's a good eating dish for people who don't like fish. That's what I like to say.
So Max, how long does the dressing hold?
You really want to know? Pretty much forever, no. I've had it sit in my cooler for up to a week. The sharpness, it loses its sharpness after about 2 days. It mellows quite a bit. After a week, you can re-emulsify it just by throwing it right back in the blender. You don't have to separate it down or anything like that. But after that, you keep in mind it's going to change its flavor, even in a well-sealed container. Okay. But yeah, do it ahead. Most of my stuff is stuff that you want to do ahead, just to facilitate. We don't do anything a la minute anymore. The guys try to do that, and it kills them. Much too busy a place for that. All right, let's get some of this out and start breaking them down. Yeah, looks good. Yeah. Okay, so as you can see, I don't know if you can see on the monitor, but there's in the spaces in between, there's these little white piles of protein that have come off. All right, set that right up there. And on some of these smaller pieces, like here, again, the tendon is torn, where I cut a little too deeply and it's pulled away. So you want to use if you're plating this on a large, could you pass that around, please? If you're plating this on a large, which is what we would do in the restaurant, just to give you some indication of how we do this. Just so you guys can see. So you'd have a piece here, and you'd go opposite, like such. And you just run the dressing around. Probably get 3 on here very easily. Yeah, we'll do that. And it's okay if you get a little of the pan juice in there. That's nothing more than flavor. And then just generously smatter around. Potatoes. And make sure you get some garlic and preserved lemon. And then just to offset the color, you'd have something like that. And you guys can start in on that, okay? So what I'll do here, this one was done yesterday. As you can see, it's still coats quite nicely. Oh, can't catch me. Push back. No, we're all done there. Yeah, there's plenty of sauce, so knock yourself out. And there you have monkfish, whole roast monkfish with passion fruit vinaigrette, preserved lemon, fingerling potatoes. Made our time. East by Northeast is part of a conglomerate. We have 4. I currently head up one now. We are located in Montauk, 51 South Edgemere is the place, just past the movie theater, as we like to say. We are in season 320 seats. Right now we seat about 170, a little more than half. Originally, the restaurant opened in 2000. It was supposed to be Pan-Asian, but the owners don't like that description. They don't like the description of fusion food. They wanted distinct North American, New England cuisine and distinct Asian cuisine. They wanted things not only just from Japan, but China, Thailand, the whole of Asia, Near East as well. But unfortunately, the first few chefs that we went through, we had basically straight up Chinese food. Being in Montauk with a winter population of somewhere around 300, you can only eat Chinese food a couple of nights a week at best. So that didn't work out too well. Now in our 12th season, going into our 12th season, we've honed in more on the New England style, a little bit less. This was a special dish. It's not a full-time menu item. I'll do this dish, less the passion fruit vinaigrette and more of a fumet base, or sometimes even a cream base, so almost like a chowder with applewood smoked bacon, maybe some mushrooms or some wood ear mushrooms, things that are more New England based, just to keep that New England feel. So our cuisine, you know, we have sushi on there, we have some ceviches, which of course are South American. It's a little bit of a conglomeration of everything else. I've been with the company almost 20 years.
I found it interesting when you said something about the oil that you use. You said virgin oil, excuse me. You said virgin oil and olive oil. I guess was a mixture of the two makes it different when you're frying the fish.
Absolutely. The thing to remember about oil, couple of things to remember: smoke points and flavor profiles. Some things, you might see a recipe that says you want a neutral oil. So you want something like, I guess, rapeseed or grapeseed oil rather, that really doesn't impart any flavor into the fish. I was brought up in basic French cuisine and American cuisine, where you're looking for, a lot of those things you're looking for serious, big flavors in the mouth. So I learned to cook with extra virgin olive oil to begin with. That's the olive oil that's coming off the first pressing of the olive. It tends to be very expensive. It can go rancid on you if it's real high quality stuff. It's not something you want to introduce to a lot of heat. Reason being is there's particulate matter in there. If that particulate matter from the olive burns, then you're going to taste that bitterness is going to come off. And same thing with, a lot of chefs will tell you, you don't want to blend extra virgin olive oil at a high blend, because as you do that, you're smashing those particulates, and again, you're heating it up and imparting bitterness. Done properly, you'll see a lot of recipes with extra virgin, cooking with extra virgin olive oil. That said, anything going down to that scale of other kinds of oils, you're going to be able to go with a higher temperature. You don't want to season a pan with extra virgin olive oil, it's just going to be bitter. You want to use something like a pure, which can withstand the heat, which is pressed from the leavings of that first pressing and actually cooked a little bit in the process as well. You don't, you know, so it's going to be able to take some of that, a little bit of that smoke coming off of there, and you're not going to get too much. When I was over at Harvest, which is one of our sister restaurants, I used exclusively a pure olive oil for pretty much everything. And people often ask me, it's like, oh, how much butter is in this dish? And you're like, none. Because it takes various and sundry identities as you're using it for different things. And you can often finish a dish with olive oil to get that richness that you're looking for with butter, then you don't need the butter. So that's what that is. Any other questions? I'm happy to talk. I can talk all day.
Any of the food costs or the pricing?
For this dish, as I started to talk about when I first started with this and try to have a little bit of food economy, monkfish ranges from $7 to $11 a pound for what you saw me butcher to clean up today. So you're looking at, and that's actually one of the reasons, as I started to say, sometimes I get ahead of myself. I went with the whole loin, because a whole loin will be just about a pound. All right, so I can start with that and say, okay, well, it's gonna cost me $7, maybe $9 by the time I finish trimming it. I know that's going to the plate, that's what it's gonna be. And general formulas, they say 33%. So, you know, 3 sevens is 21. So you're gonna add in your passion fruit. This is a fairly expensive product, but you're only gonna use a couple of tablespoons onto the plate. So you're figuring, end of story, maybe $10 on the outside. Russian fingerling potatoes are an expensive product. If you want to substitute our lovely Long Island wax potatoes and cut them up, perfect substitution for that. In fact, I actually started this dish with that because, you know, once you start cutting things up, who's to know? A lot of your clients won't know, your foodies and the chefs who visit you will know. So, you know, you want your truth in advertising, for sure. Garlic, peels, you know, again, sense to the plate. So at the end of the day, this whole thing is probably, with the two of these together, is $10, you know, so. Menu pricing was $38. That's what we did, yeah. You know, and then once August hits, it's $42. So come in the wintertime when we're doing our $15 price fix, and what you'll get is you'll get a portion of this and an appetizer and a salad as well. So that's how we do that. It's not warm, but just pull out of here. This is more on this side. Just pull out of here. What you need. There's plenty in there. Trust me. You only need a bite to get the sense of what it's doing. So.
Do you use preserved lemons in any of your other dishes?
Where I am, no. Where I was, I used it quite frequently. It's good with lamb. When I was at Harvest, which again, I keep talking about Harvest because I was there for 14 years before they moved me over to the other location. We had a lamb tagine. Harvest is a broad-based Mediterranean restaurant, which is around the corner from us. Lamb tagine, which is cooked in a vessel. It's you have couscous and a protein in a vessel that's cooked in an oven, and the whole thing just sort of melts together. Basically a stew, crock pot type of thing. And preserved lemon is used there. I've used it in dressings. You want to be careful with it because it does carry a lot of salt, and you want to pull that salt out in most instances. In other instances, you don't. I've heard of chefs using it as a sorbet, as a palate cleanser in between courses. In fact, the previous chef used that for one of his weddings, and he did a little preserved lemon sorbet, which was very, very nice.
Is monkfish, is it year-round in Monmouth? Is it pulled out of the sea year-round?
Yeah, pretty much. Tends to go up, spike up in price towards July. I generally didn't run with that then. I started this dish actually in August, and it seemed to be running fairly well. I was getting really beautiful specimens, August, September, and parts of October, and then it was gone. And then Ethan reminded me I had this demo, and I said, any monkfish around? So we were going to substitute with something else, with the snapper probably, or something else, or bass, you know, something frozen. But these came yesterday, and they were absolutely, you know, spectacular specimens. So I would say probably there's a run now, right now. Usually fluke, but the weather hasn't been great for fishing. I've been striking out lately with my fishermen. I didn't even taste this. Chef should taste this. That works. No problem. Enjoy.